Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Wherever you're joining us, we are Automation Hour. So if you're joining us for the first time, all lines will be muted. Please post your questions to our Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour. We will post the link to the recording as well as the deck and all the goodies that Mike has provided for you after the event. So again, use our resources, Salesforce Automation Hour, Trailblazer community, and our website, automationhour.com. And we are fully booked out for the rest of the year. So we have some first-time presenters, some repeat presenters, MVPs. Do want to point out a special October 23rd, where Rakesh will be coming back to present. So definitely sign up for that. And if you can't join us in person, that's fine. Hit us up on the recording after the fact. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, because without them, we cannot bring this free webinar series for you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And here are your co-hosts, David Litton, Rakesh Gupta, and myself. It seems ages ago that we were together at Midwest Dreamin'. So hopefully one day soon, 2021, we will be able to see each other in person again. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I do want to give a shout out to a upcoming virtual community event. We can't meet in person, but we can meet virtually. And there is Northeast Dreamin' next week for the whole week. And you could register for free at northeastdreamin.com. They have, I think, nearly 1,000 people registered. So definitely sign up and we will see you there. And with that, I am excited to bring on a new presenter to Automation Hour, Mike DeMaria. I met Mike at Northeast Dreamin'. Was it last year? It seems like ages ago. Last year or the year before.
Definitely last year.
He is also a fellow Lightning champion. So we're excited to have him on to share his knowledge with you. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike. And you should have presenter rights.
I do. And let me start sharing. Okay, yeah, so once again, my name is Mike DeMaria. I am a Salesforce developer at a financial services company called Equitable. We do life insurance, annuities, investment advice, that sort of thing. Just for a little context, the company I work for, we have a couple thousand Salesforce users all over the United States. Every one of them behaves in a different way. Everyone works in a slightly different way and has different needs and different does things a little differently for depending on what products they sell or where they are or where they're located. So this whole concept of customizing Salesforce and customizing for the end user really is kind of something I have to deal with every time I build things because everyone in my company works slightly differently and I don't have the control that some other people do where we could say, you are going to work this way, whether you like it or not. And unfortunately, sometimes we do that. And the results from the user says, well, I'm not going to use that. And so that's really why this topic is something that I find to be kind of important. In terms of platform usage, I've been on the platform for about 5 years. I started in quality assurance, moved over into a developer role after getting certifications. So I'm a certified application architect, platform dev 2, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we're talking about literally customizing Salesforce, and not just customizing the application, because anyone could do that. But really what we're talking about is customizing it at the user level for users by users. So users can control how the system behaves, how it works on a user by user basis. And to go through this, we're going to be creating a bunch of different things. We're going to be doing some admin level functionality. We're going to do some declarative developer stuff, especially in flows. And then we're going to talk a little bit about programming. So I'm a little bit talking to everyone in the ecosystem, from top to bottom or bottom to top. And in many places here, you will be getting the metadata so that you can take the stuff that we're going to look at today, install it in your own developer org or your own Trailhead playground, and go forward with this yourself as well. And everywhere where there's a little bit of metadata included, you'll see that little wrench there. So you'll be able to actually do this on your own. So first things first, what are we even talking about here? You know, what are the customizations? And these are things that the user can choose. How the system behaves, what it shows, how it works, how to interact with the system, stuff that they could have pre-filled in, you know, to say, I want to have these things always show up whenever I click a button. That's the sort of customizations I'm referring to. There's some already built in the system automatically. So things like that pin default list, that's a user customization. Activity timeline related list, 2 different ways the system displays. That's also a customization. And these are ones that you get for free, you know, and so as builders on this platform, you know, what can we do as builders to give a user similar levels of customization? And these could be things that maybe it's only on the screen that they're on, maybe it's only during the session that logged into the system, maybe it's just on one device, maybe the user sets something and it stays that way until they change it later on. As we go through this, one of the things that you're going to have to ask yourself, though, is the balance between what do we offer, you know, as a builder of this, and what do we not want to offer. And this is going to be kind of like a recurring theme as you go through these, because as you add customizations, what ends up happening is you add slight complexity to the solution you're building. And you're also giving the user more choices, which gives them more complexity as well. Because now they're going to say, oh, I have to choose this, I have to choose that, I have to choose that. For example, open up Microsoft Word from 1997 and look at the options dialog box, and you get 8,000 checkboxes, and it's just overwhelming. And there's too much choice. And too much choice is in some ways just as bad as having too little. And so you're going to have to eventually, as you figure out your user base, strike a balance between what do we offer and what should we not offer. So why do we do it? You know, why do we do this at all? Well, first of all, if you build a solution that you try to make work for everybody, you're probably going to end up having a solution that kind of doesn't work for anyone. You build these, what I call the lowest common denominator solutions, where you build something to try to work for your entire organization. And what ends up happening there is everyone has these little things that they want to do, and you're saying, no, you can't do that. I have to make something that works for everybody. Which means that whatever you build has to be correct for everyone all the time. And instead, you could have it so that people can work and control the system around their own needs and their own desires of how they wish to work. You know, we don't want to have to tell people how to work. People can figure out on their own the most efficient way to work on the system. Now, there's also another side benefit to this customization thought process. Your business is going to change. Your users' needs are going to change. If anything, this year we've seen, you know, overnight you could tell a business of 10,000 people in a business, hey, tomorrow you're not going to the office. All of you are working from home tomorrow. Deal with it. And so by building in some of this customization stuff, even if you don't make choices available to the end user, so maybe you make it so that you could, let's say you're showing a list of fields, and you say, all right, I'm not going to hard code in this list of fields. I'm going to make it through custom metadata, or I'm going to do something where I could change this in the future without actually having to do any hard work. You could more easily adapt to future changes in the business without having to re-architect your entire solution, or at least some of your solution. Or it makes it easier to change it. Or you can take some changes that have to be done and hand it off to someone at, let's say, a lower level. It's almost like why build your own custom UI when you could just have it use a page layout and just drag and drop fields and have a junior level admin make changes to a page layout instead of paying a developer to customize the Lightning component? Similar here. If you design with the idea that this is going to change in the future, you can more easily change it in the future. So how can we do this? Well, we got a whole bunch of stuff. And it starts with something as simple as just using those custom labels or custom permissions to enable or disable features. Something that starts as easy as that to as complicated as making your own custom objects to hold configuration data. And each one of these options, they all have the benefits and they all have the drawbacks. This is ultimately, we're all builders on the platform here. This is an engineering question. The engineering is always a trade-off. And really what you're trading off is as you allow more customization and customization capabilities, you're really trading off simplicity. Because truth be told, if you add in this stuff, it's going to make your solution a little bit more complicated. But the benefit to that complexity may be long-term, being able to reconfigure more easily, or give the user a better experience. But let's start with something really simple. Let's say for the moment that we want to create we have a request from the business. Every time an opportunity is created, they want to automatically have a task created as well. Maybe a task that says follow up on this opportunity. Could be anything. And this is something that comes from my actual experience as well. Like this is something I had to implement about a month or two ago anyways. Here's the problem. The business thinks this is a good idea for the users. They think users are going to like this and going to want to do this, but they're not 100% sure that this is really going to be a useful thing. And so instead of rolling out this new process or a business owner saying, I think this is useful, let's implement this, and then everyone says this is silly, why are we doing this? Why don't we do a pilot program in production where we take this feature, we're going to roll it out to production, we're going to give it to a couple of users, maybe expand a little bit more, maybe be a little unsure if this is going to scale up when everyone uses it. So maybe we could turn it on for maybe like 2 hours or 1 or 2 days and then turn it off and see to make sure we didn't really blow everything up. And so one thing that we could do here is we can create a pilot group. And so I have a custom label on the left, and then on the right, I've created a custom permission. You create a custom permission, you assign it to a permission set, you assign users to that permission set. Okay, why do I have a custom label in this? All right, the permission set, all right, fine, that kind of makes sense. Why the label? So here's a process builder. And in my process builder, I created a process builder that says, when you create a new opportunity, create a task. But in the condition field, you notice here I have 2 conditions there. I have a condition for checking for that pilot, that pilot custom permission, all right, fine. And then I have a label in there, and I have an or in there. And so why is that? Well, when this fires off, it first says, all right, is this person in the pilot program? If they are, great, create the opportunity. If they're not, skip it. At some point, we're going to want to go out of pilot. And we're going to enable this for everyone. And so instead of having to deploy a new version of this process builder, and this could be done in a flow, and you can do this in code as well, but process builder is a very easy way to see this. You change just the custom label. You change it. So instead of saying pilot, like before, you see it start off with pilot, I change it to say enable for all, and it enables it for everyone. And so I don't have to assign that permission set, and I don't have to change my, to every user, and I don't have to change anything else. I just flip a label, and now everyone can use it. And let's say things go horribly wrong, and everyone's like, oh, this is horrible, I don't like this. I just flip the label back, and then it turns it off. And turn on, turn off. And turn on for 5 minutes, turn off for 5 minutes. I don't have to roll back. I don't have to redeploy. I don't have to go figure out what version of process builder, I should roll back to and undo all my damage. It makes it really easy to turn things on and turn things off. And this is like the most bare bones configuration thing that we could talk about. And this, we're gonna get more into user by user in a moment. But this is a really easy way to deal with custom permission, deal with pilot programs, which I greatly recommend. I've been getting more and more enjoyment out of doing pilot programs with small users instead of trying to get everything right at the beginning. We're going to actually now start going down this customization road and actually start getting our hands dirty inside Salesforce. So the next piece, this user record custom fields. So I have a few user stories that came up. First, new users don't know how to use the system at all. And yeah, we could send them to Trailhead, but there might be custom business processes. This might be custom definitions of what the different stages mean or key fields. And so I want to give users a little bit more information, a little bit more context-sensitive information of how to use the system. Likewise, I collected some user feedback. And there's something called related lists quick links. It shows you all the related lists. Some users like that and they want that right on the page. Other users says, I have it in a tab on the side. I don't want to ever see that. I don't care. I can go see that. I don't use it, hide it. So now I have two conflicting things that people want to do. They want to see it and they also want to not see it at the same time. I could create two different Lightning pages for this. But now you got to have two different apps, or you have to, or how do people go between both? You know, does someone have to put them in a different group? Do they have to give permission? Too much of a pain in the neck. I want users to be able to turn these things on and turn these things off on their own, you know, without having to have an admin spend any time dealing with it. And so this is where we're actually going to start using this stuff. So let's go right into Salesforce. And first, let's take a look what it looks like. So you can see here, tutorial. There's a box up here. There's some more info over here, more information over here, a little bit of info over here of how to use these things, how to use the system. And the quick links aren't here at all. And then I have two flows over here. Show tutorial. All right, I'm going to turn that off. And now they all go away. It's like, oh wait, no, I need that back. I need that back. I don't know the system well enough. Hey, look, now they're all back. And show quick links. Do I want to see quick links? Yes. And now they're here. If I want to get rid of them, now they're gone. So how do we do this? I'm going to go into setup. And I'm going to switch to my object manager. And so this one's actually kind of relatively easier of a way to do this. I'm going to go into user. And I have two fields here in the user object. Show related links, show tutorial. And these are both just checkbox fields. And on the page, if I go in and edit my Lightning page, here's my tutorials. They're just rich text components. And I use component visibility. And I say if user, if that checkbox is true, show it. Same thing with the quick links. If that new custom field that I made, if it's true, show it. And on the user object, it's very easy. If you have a user object field, very easy to add this stuff where you could say if these values are true or false. And you could do pick lists as well. You know, so if you wanted it to be pick lists, it could be text files, could be anything. Lightning visibility makes it very easy to control this stuff. In terms of how the user actually sets those things, because there's nothing in there, you know, I don't want a user to have to go into their own user object to set these things, because that's just silly. So I have a simple flow. I'm going to open up one of them. So all the flow does is it gets the user's ID, you know, gets the user object, gets that checkbox field, displays a screen, asks them if they want to see it, As a convenience, I take whatever their current value is and have it here. So if it's checked by default. If it's not checked, it's not checked by default. If you don't do that, what ends up happening is people feel like, oh, I have to check this because, you know, I don't know what the state is. So it's always nice to echo back to the user what their current settings are. And then it just does a simple update. Now I have a separate flow for tutorials and a separate flow for quick links. Could these be the same flow? Absolutely, sure, go nuts. Put them all together if you wish. I have them separate here just mostly for demonstration purposes, but the other one, let's see, what's the other one called? I don't even know if I have, I don't know if I even created it. Oh, I did, tutorial settings and show quick links. It's hiding in here somewhere, there it is, quick link settings. Both flows look exactly identical, it's just pulling different fields. So if you want to, as an exercise later on, combine them together, yeah, go for it. And so that's like, it's a really easy one, you know. But we're gonna get more complicated. We're gonna get a lot more complicated now. Here's the next piece. User story came in. The user wants to see a bunch of account fields on an opportunity page. So when they're working an opportunity, they want to have certain key fields from the account displayed on the same page. And so the very first thing you might say is, okay, I could do this really easily and declaratively using a related records component. I go into Lightning App Builder, you know, I go into edit the Lightning page, I throw on the related records component, I select one of those quick actions for the update, I have my 7 or 8 fields on there, and I call it a day. Done. It works. We go out and get user feedback. And users start to talk about it. And they say, I don't need all that info. Some users say, I only want to know about the service level agreements. That's all I care about working on. Other people say, I never work in service level. That's a different department. I only care about these other fields. I don't want to see all these things. And you might be sitting there right now and saying, who cares? There's only 2 fields. But this really matters to the people using the system day to day. You know, when you're talking to someone who's making, let's say, 400 or 500 cold calls every week, or you know, calling our customers every week, these little things matter. And in a Trailhead playground, yeah, it sounds trivial. You know, there's only a few fields, but imagine for the moment that you have hundreds of account fields. My account object in production at my job, we have about 500 fields on our account object, covering all sorts of different things. I couldn't just display all 500, and I couldn't figure out which of those 500 would be relevant to a particular user. So I look at this and we look at this and we say, oh, you know, I get a couple of things that sound similar. These things all sound very similar. You know, I see a grouping of things about SLAs, see people that care about these other things. Some people don't care about anything. Some people care about everything. So the first thing we think of is, okay, let's use custom metadata types. We'll create a custom metadata type and we'll control visibility to each one of these fields. And we'll set up a CMT record, and we're going to have a checkbox, you know, a yes/no for each of these. And then we're going to create a record for each. We're going to create one that says, show me everything, show me nothing, show me the SLA, show me just you know, everything but SLA. You know, we're going to create 4 of those. And we're going to use that trick we just learned about user objects. We're going to create a thing on the user field, you know, we're going to create a new custom field on the user object. And people can select this, whatever one of those custom metadata types that they want. And then we'll build a flow to go in, find the record, find the account, find out which custom metadata type, use that, pick the visibility, do all that, go through it all. And then we're going to put it on the page like this, and it's going to work, and it's going to be beautiful. And then people are going to start giving feedback. And what are we going to find out from them? They're going to want lots of contradictory things. And you know, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of users here, not just 4. You know, when we go out to a bigger pilot, and we're going to find people who say things like, I want to see SLA and upsell and nothing else. Or I want to see certain things only sometimes, but nothing other times of the year. And we're going to have a whole bunch of different combinations. So now what do? how do we meet the needs of the entire organization? Okay, what if we just create a custom metadata record for every combination of fields from 0 to 7 fields? We'll say, forget it, everyone wins. We'll create a view for everyone. Oh, there's 128 combinations. That's a lot of work. I don't want to create that many records. Can you imagine trying to select from all these? And imagine if I had 8 fields. If I had 8 fields, I'd add 256 combinations. If I had 9 fields, I've had 512. This grows huge, really fast. You have, by default, there's like about 30 different standard account fields. If I tried to do this for all just standard fields, I'd be in the quadrillions. Okay, let's say users modify their own. We'll add a custom metadata field with the user ID. We'll do a lookup off that. We'll create a flow where the user can create their own custom metadata field, selection, and that'll work. You can't modify custom metadata in a flow. Can't create it, can't modify it, can't delete it. You have to go into setup and do it, or admins have to do it. Well, that could work for a small group of users, but that's not going to work for a big group of users. We need a different idea. Let's use custom settings. So not a lot of people have necessarily used custom settings, especially the hierarchical custom settings. If you've used custom metadata, if you use the custom metadata types, it is very similar. It is abnormally similar. To the point where at some points, if I didn't tell you which one was which, you might not even know. Are we talking custom metadata or custom settings? They're called hierarchical because you can create literally a hierarchy of settings where you can set it at the org level, the profile level, and the user level. And each one of those, as you get more and more specific, it overrides the previous setting. So here's an example. I have 3 custom settings here: the discount one, the cost center, and the task subject. If I query for a user and say, what is the custom settings for this one user? If they have a user level one specified, you see that 40% there, that overrides the ones above it. So it pulls from the org level, and then if there's a profile one, it will use those instead. If there's a user one, it will use even those even more so instead. So it lets you override. Now, you don't have to honor the hierarchy as well. You can, as a builder of this system, you could say, I don't care about the hierarchy and I only care about the values that the user themselves specifically stored. So you can easily query either for whatever the hierarchical setting should be, so you get that 40, 1002 in webinar, or you could query at the user level and just get that 40%, or you can query at the profile level and find out what it's set at the profile. And in the metadata that's been provided, you're going to see both, where in one place I'm querying based on the user's ID and getting the user settings, and other ones where I'm just saying, just give me the value, and it just gives it back to you. It gives you whatever it is. These are very easy to use in formulas. So in process builders and in your flows, you can query against the custom settings without actually having to query for the record itself. You could use it literally in a formula as is, which makes it very easy to work with, just like you could do a custom metadata. And in terms of complexity, they're about equal. Because if you look here, on the left is my custom metadata, on the right is my custom settings, and they look very, very similar, don't they? In fact, the only place I have a difference is just creating a new versus updating, because you can't update custom metadata, but it's very easy to update or create new custom settings for a user. So why don't we go take a quick look at them, and take a look at custom settings and see how they work. So first thing is I'm going to go into custom settings. And I have one here, it's called Account Quick Look. And here it is. and you can see all the custom fields. And if I want to add a new one, I can. Custom settings, you are limited a little bit. As you can see, you can't use everything in custom settings, and I'm not sure what the difference is between this and the custom metadata, what's in one versus one the other. I can say your text fields, you're limited to about 255 characters. You can't do lookups. You can't do lookups, but you can take a user ID or a record ID and put it into an 18-character text box. So if you want to do lookups on things, you can kind of simulate it by writing out a string of characters and reading that and querying against that when you do your flows or when you do your code. And then inside here, I'm going to hit manage. And this is where you can actually see the settings. So every user or profile will have their settings here. I'm going to hit view. And this is what my login username, has as my settings for this. And I can go in here, and as an admin, I could go and edit this, and I could change them on my, on my behalf of myself. But you could also change it for individual users as well. If you want to go in and you want to change something for a user without having to explain how to go in and change whatever you used for users to set the stuff, you could do it here too. Same thing with profiles. If you want to do it at a profile level, you just set it as a profile. This is a lookup field, and you can create your own custom settings directly in here, which is nice and all for an admin, but that's not the most useful thing for a user. So unfortunately, if you want users to really be able to use these custom settings, you're going to need to build some sort of interface on top of this, some sort of user interface. And so one of them that I have is one of these flows. I'm going to open up the flow, and we're going to see how this works. So here's the flow. It's a standard screen flow, not automatically launched or anything. You throw it on the page and it runs. I get the opportunity, I'm getting on the opportunity record. I'm getting the associated account ID. Then I go in and I query for the account. I get the account fields. And then I go in and I query for the custom setting. And so the way the custom settings work is here, this object, that's your custom setting object, just like any custom object out there or custom metadata record out there, it's considered an object. The field setup owner ID, this is the lookup field, and I set it to whatever the user ID is if I was logged in. Store the data. And then now I do a search to say, did this user actually set any of these values? And this here, is querying directly against the user level. So it ignores the hierarchy. This flow, this demonstration flow is ignoring hierarchy completely. If there is a setting, if it's not null, I grab the value from each one of them from the custom setting, and I put it into a formula. This is just a simple flow level formula, true, false, for each one of these. Display screen, here's the outputs. So this is from the, from the account record, and each one of these has a visibility condition. Just like we saw on the, with the user record level on the Lightning pages, same thing here, we do a visibility control. And so if it's enabled, it shows. If it's not enabled, it doesn't show. And then because we need an interface, I have for the users and ask, okay, what fields do you want to display? All checkbox fields. I, once again, will populate with the default value from whatever the user previously set so that their existing settings show up. And then if they don't have a custom setting, I create a new one. So I create a new with the values. setting the setup owner ID, which is kind of like the only really required field when you create one of these things. To this, all these other fields, I set whatever value they had as true or false. If they were an existing, if they had ones before, well, that's easy. I just find that record from before and update the values just the same. So let's put these on a page and see what it looks like. So I am back on my page, and I am going to switch over to an opportunity. Pull back a bit. So we're going to add a flow. My flow is my custom settings. Save it and run it. And here it is. So I'm going to hit next. I'm going to choose my fields. I want, let's say, all of those. Right, next, finish. And I think I chose an account that had no data on it. So let me switch over to a different opportunity that hopefully actually has some data. Okay, let me find an account that has data on it. Unless I accidentally broke something, no. I think I accidentally broke something. Lovely. Let's see if any of the other ones work. Okay, I broke my flow. I think I broke the query on the flow, unfortunately, while clicking around. That's a shame. But we can see here, if I change these values, it goes in and it saves it and it will update it. Likewise over here, this was the custom metadata where I could choose between one of 4 sets. So this was our, previous idea before, where we could set it, but only a few select ones could pull. From the custom settings, you could select and choose, and users can choose which ones do they want and which ones will save. Going over to programmers. Programmers, you could also use custom settings very easily. It's basically 3 lines of code, where the first line we're getting it for the user or their profile. You set the values and you do an upsert. You can do an insert if it doesn't exist. You can do an update if it does exist. You can do an upsert just to get everything, because if the user doesn't have a custom setting as a programmer, if you do a query for it, you just get back nulls. And in the metadata that has been sent over, that is included, there's a very simple OR component that displays it. So, talking on the developer side of things here, where I say, okay, we're going to do the same thing where we grab a bunch of Booleans and say, show it if it's true, show it if it's not true. And in the controller, on the Apex side of things, let's see, zoom in. basically all we do is we grab the settings, we do a query for it, we take the values, we set the values and return that. As part of this, I'm returning it as part of a wrapper class because I recently learned how that works. So why not? We'll throw that in as well. And from a display standpoint, from a user standpoint, even a Lightning component, it looks very similar. And this is really what we're doing here is we're showing different ways that we can use and different things in our toolbox, different options available. So here it is in Aura. And we can have the users turn these things on, turn them off, save it, and there we go. And this is using custom settings. Actually, funny enough, that's working, but the flow is not, which is interesting. But here we're seeing it actually using the custom settings, pulling things correctly. And users can go and they could change it and they could set it however they want. And anytime they want to change it, they could change it, and it changes and updates. The nice thing is that this is persistent. So if I log out and I come back a week later to Salesforce on a different device, maybe on a mobile device, maybe on somewhere else, all these settings stay and they stick around. And if I go to a different opportunity, they stick around. And so it's a way to offer persistence in what the user's experience is. It's not just, all right, change it, set this, and now that's it until next time they log in. No, this will follow the user from device to device, browser to browser, day to day. And in this very multi-device model that we're in right now, it's a nice little feature to have that you could offer and say, your settings will follow you wherever you go. So what about custom objects? And why would I ever want to use a custom object to do some of these settings? So here's the thing. Custom settings are in the application cache, which means that they are very fast to access. You can query for a custom setting and get a response back really, really quickly. And that's good. But you're limited on space. So Salesforce has, and I think these are hard limits. I don't think you could pay them enough money to upgrade any of these. You are limited to 10 megabytes or 1 megabyte per user, whichever is lower. Doesn't matter how many users you have in your system, you got 10 megs of custom settings. Now that's a lot of data. That's about 5,000 standard account records, or that is a book that's, well, 6,000 page book. That's about, I don't know, the size of probably every holy text in the entire world combined is about 6,000 pages probably, give or take. It's a lot of data, but it's not all the data. And eventually, if you offer enough customization options, you might run out. So one of your options is instead, you can create a custom object for storing preferences. And you don't have to create, you're not limited to one. You create as many as you want. You create a custom object for everything you want. There is a downside to use custom objects for your storage, for your preference storage. You cannot access it directly in formulas. So you cannot use it in a process builder very easily, if at all. It makes it a little harder to use in flows and code because now you have to do a query for those custom objects, which means that if you're doing bulkified operations, now you have to be a little more concerned about how you do your bulkification, because now you're dipping into the database every time you try to update. I don't know if it's necessarily a good idea, but it's not too dangerous to put a custom setting lookup in, let's say, a for loop on a trigger, which you can't do that with a SQL query. You don't want to put a SQL query in a for loop on a trigger. That's a bad idea because you're going to run into the apex governor limits. Too many SQL queries. I've seen that happen in flows as well. So if you go down the custom object route, you're going to have that as something to consider, and you're going to want to do bulk testing. especially in the test phase, to make sure you didn't blow anything up. If you're not sure how to do that, just grab out data loader and load up like 500 records at once, and you'll know if you get errors. If you do the custom object, the easiest way is to create a lookup field. And so in the data provided, I'm going to go back in here. So I've done this solution as well for you. And I've created an object called custom preference. And you can see all the checkbox fields. And then I created this field called user, which is a lookup to the user field. It could also be, if you didn't want it to be a lookup, it could just be a text string. Like if you wanted to kind of replicate the custom metadata, where you do it by profile, or you do it by public group, or you do something wacky like that, you could just make it an 18-character text string and just store the record ID in this field instead of it being a lookup field. And then the flows. The flow is going to look pretty much the same. It's very, you can see it's extremely similar to what we had before. Actually, that's the custom setting field. Let's go to the custom object one. That's what I want to see. So here's custom object. Here's the only difference, really. I'm getting from a different object. My setup, user C, user ID, basically very similar to custom settings. Very, very similar. The only difference is this, as I said, this query right here is slower, and it does cost time. It costs time and it costs you a query. For some people, that might not matter if you're dealing with small amounts of data. For people who deal with a lot of data and a lot of records, and especially bulkified records, that could be a big deal. Screen flows, not so much. Auto-launched flows, oh yeah. If you're doing before flows, you're doing after flows and that stuff, you have to start worrying about that sort of thing and about the performance. Even if you're small today, in 5 years from now, your company becomes huge, then you got, you don't want to have to re-architect. So I have a few other ideas in here that if you want to play with this idea of customization, here's a couple of projects that you could kind of work on just to practice, just practice projects, something could be concrete that you could do just to see if you can do it, and to start learning, because all these things that we've been talking about for the past 45 minutes, this is all stuff that you have to throw in the toolbox to pull out. And you might pull out some of these, you might pull out all these, you might pull out a few, you might never pull some out. But these are all different little tricks and techniques that you have to think about and know about. And when you know about it and you have it in the back of your head and you're thinking about this as you develop things and you build your solution, it'll help you. And doing projects is a good way to exercise. So the first one, very similar to that very first idea we talked about with the creating a task when an opportunity is created. Give the user the ability to specify some of that data. Let them put their own subject line, let them put their own priority level, maybe description, maybe have them be able to choose if they want the due date to be 30, 60, or 90 days. Give them a little interface to build that, and then have, when you create your task, query against your data and set your values based on that. Another option, you got an expense, we have an expense report. We track expense reports in Salesforce. Create a custom object called expense report. Create a couple of fields on there for expended amount, date, a few whatevers. And then have, let's say, a button that launches a flow, perhaps. And have it pre-fill in data for the user. So the user has their own approver. Let's say you want the user to specify their approver, office location, and cost center code. 3 custom fields. They click a button, it automatically fills those fields in for them. Let's say 90% of the time, the user always puts in the same 3 values. Why not have the ability for them to specify that and pre-fill it in automatically? Makes life a lot easier. Why have to keep re-entering data in? Just let the user say, I want the, it's very similar to a macro. If you've used the console and you know the macro features on the console, and if you don't, check them out, they're pretty cool. It's kind of similar to that, but I know a lot of people are not going to like using consoles and not going to want to write macros. They're just going to want a little button to populate their 3 fields and call it a day. Makes it easier to train the users as well. Another one, users spend a week inputting leads, and during this one particular week, they always assign it to a particular queue. Have a setting so that every time a new lead's created by that user, it automatically assigns it to the queue so the user doesn't have to remember to do that step. And if they did it, whatever, just override it, just populate it for them. And when they're done, they could uncheck that box, and then it assigns leads to whoever it's supposed to, whether they specified it or they put them themselves. Makes one less thing the user has to do. And if a user has to go in and manually create, let's say, hundreds of leads, and let's say they have to go and verify these things, so like they have to verify the leads or they're working the leads. If you could shave a little bit of time off someone's life, even something as simple as just not having to do a silly little lookup field and have to click on a queue, those little seconds that they save really add up. And if you're talking about doing tens, hundreds of these things over the course of a week, it really adds up to significant savings of productivity and makes the data a little bit cleaner, because then they won't accidentally forget to not to assign it to a queue or to assign it to the queue. Tutorial mode, I showed a very binary, it's on, it's off. Maybe instead offer gradients. So you could have tutorials that are, maybe have like a real beginner, intermediate, and expert level. Let the user choose what level they're at, and using conditional visibility, let some maybe have more complicated ones, maybe less complicated ones. Maybe have a mode saying, do you want text or video, and have embedded video instead. That's another option potentially. So you can kind of control how the user sees the stuff, where they see it, or maybe even set it at different on different objects. So you could have settings for show me tutorial on accounts, leads, but don't show me anything on these other fields. Or maybe show me only on my custom business fields and objects, and not on anything else. The last one is something I actually kind of had to do. So default account and default opportunity teams. Salesforce offers the ability that you can automatically add your default teams to your account or your opportunities. The only problem is this is a binary state. It's on or it's off. You always get a team or you never get a team. A user might want to have a little more control over this, and they might say, I don't want to add opportunity teams except for opportunities that are worth over $50,000. If I have less than $50,000, it's just me. If it's more than that, I want everyone involved. You can do this, and you could do it without having to do any code. And so it's part of the package thing we have here is I've also given you 2 flows, one for default teams and one for opportunities. And this is actually a separate package. This will only install if you have account teams or opportunity teams enabled, which is very easy to do. You just go into setup, search for account and opportunity team. So I have a record triggered flow, runs automatically after the record's saved, and it queries for a custom setting. And I have created a custom setting. Let's go into one of them. Let's go into that custom setting and see what it looks for. Here's auto teams. Checkbox for account team, checkbox for opportunity team, opportunity amount, and account revenue amount. And so what it says is, okay, did this person check off the account team box? That means that they want to have this thing kick off. So that has to be enabled. Then, okay, what did they set the annual revenue to? So if it's greater than whatever amount they put in, if it's greater than that, go and add the account team automatically. I also put in here a null. You see this here if a null is true. So this says if they don't specify an annual revenue at all, add it anyway, add the team. So now I'm actually offering them kind of 3 options. I'm offering Always add, never add an account team by turning this one setting off. Always add my default account team by turning this on and not specifying an account amount. Or always add it only if the revenue is greater than a certain amount. And from there, we go in and we do a query for account team members. Again, the account team member object. We get a collection of records. It goes through each one of them, adds it to the account sharing table. You see this here? You can manipulate the sharing tables through flows. So you can do this through flows very easily. You see, it just adds all the values from the account team, saves it, and then it goes and it works nicely. Same thing with opportunity teams. And so I know I've given a lot of okay, shown a lot, but like, well, how do I get all this stuff? What do I do? So I've created two packages for you and placed it online. So if you go to circusdevelopers.com/presentation/customize, here's your directory. If you're a Salesforce DX user, you could download the zip files and install it using Salesforce DX. If you want to do it through the package installers, I've included links to the package install. So if you ever install a package in a Trailhead Playground, you have the links right there. And then I have a few install instructions as well. If you run into any trouble installing this, feel free to send me a message, and I'll gladly help out. And so we have just a few minutes. So Jen, is there any questions that came in?
There are questions.
Okay.
So if folks have questions that they want to ask Mike, you can post them either on the Salesforce Automation, our Trailblazer communities, or out here in questions. So Luke just mentioned in terms of that flow where you're having an issue that maybe you need to pass the record ID to that flow component. So
yeah, I don't know. And funny enough, it was working last night. Because I know it worked yesterday because just before I sent the slides in, I ran through it all. So I don't know what the deal is, but it should be relatively easy to fix because it is clearly working for all the other stuff.
Right. Dennis asked, does it remember my preferences per account, or do I have to select what I want each time when I view a record? I think you said it retains it, but it's across the board for all accounts. It's not account specific.
So the way I've built this, that's correct. Now there is nothing necessarily stopping you from building this on an account by account basis, storing that account ID as part of the settings somewhere, and then querying for your custom settings, querying against your account, rectifying those together and saying, okay, what should I do? So let's say maybe, and something like that might make sense to do through, let's say a master detail object, on the account record, and put the user settings in there and then query against that. To try to do something like that at the custom settings level, you'll probably, if you have a bunch of accounts, you'll probably end up having a lot of records that you have to create, or creating a lot of fields. Because like custom settings are really on a user by user basis, especially custom settings. That's really user by user. If you do want to go object by object, you're gonna have to figure out a way to store that object ID and query against that object ID. So in that scenario, I would use either a combination of things or use some sort of custom object style solution.
All right, Stuart says, this is great stuff, Mike. Just this morning, my boss was discussing with us how using custom settings and custom labels would be a great way to move away from hard coding IDs into our orgs. It was good to watch you use these in automation and how easy it is to reference different things. One question, to allow users to choose their UI preferences, could this also be used for community users? So community users' preferred settings could be set via custom settings and changed in a community site?
That's a good question. Now, I'm not too familiar with communities personally. Um, I would say if the community users have a user ID stored somehow, that might be available. Maybe. You'll have to experiment with it and see. And it shouldn't be too hard to do a really quick mock-up of just like one thing. My suspicion is going to be yes, that it should be available, but as I said, I don't want to speak out of turn on communities because that is not my forte. um, but it probably should. Now, if you have a really, really huge community, and I mean like thousands or tens of thousands of people and accounts, you may run into that 10 megabyte limit, which is a lot of data. I mean, 10 megs is a lot of text data. And things like Booleans, like the checkboxes, that's a really, really small amount of data there. But you might run into a limit if you're talking about a really, really large number. So I'm not fully sure. And if you can't use custom settings, you can still use the custom object as an option, which, as I said, I'm not as huge of a fan of, but it's worth a try. In fact, and when you try it and let us know, because I'd love to know actually, because I have no idea, so post that in the in the community somewhere and let us know.
Cool. All right, Dom says, very cool solutions, Mike. You must be very popular with the users. Are there any security access considerations when selecting the approach of custom setting versus CMDT versus custom object?
I'm not aware of any in particular. Now, depending what data you put in there, I suppose you could theoretically leak out some data. Like if you store something at the profile level and you do a query for a custom setting, the user doesn't set at the user level, they could find out what's stored at the profile level, but that's really minor. I don't think there's anything significant there. At least nothing I'm overly, thinking of overly concerning offhand. As long as you don't have confidential data actually inside those things that could potentially leak out to the user. So like if you echo the values of something back to the user, especially like in a custom metadata, you put something confidential in there and you echo that back to the user, obviously the user can be able to see it. I will say the only thing to consider is for users to be able to modify custom settings, I believe there is a specific permission that they need to be able to modify custom settings. So you might have to set a permission. And that should be about it. The other thing to watch for is if on some of these things, if you're running flows or any of this code in system mode or system see all data mode, then you do have to consider what you're actually outputting to the user. Because stuff in system mode can get around field level security and can get around your access controls. So if you have to run a flow in system mode to access some of this data or maybe some of the custom settings, then you're gonna have to think about the security a little bit tighter on that.
All right, Virginia says this has been a really fantastic session. And Jock says, where do I get the package Mike just mentioned? So when we post the link to the recording on our YouTube channel, Salesforce Automation Hour, we'll also have the link to the deck. And as you see, the last page of the deck has the link to his material. So that's how you would get access to it.
Yep.
And I know we're over time, so thank you so much, Mike, for presenting, and please come back and present some more cool stuff to us again.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great, and with that, we will be closing out Automation Hour. So we'll see you guys next week, not next week, the 25th for our next session with Josh Damont. So long, bye.